You don't need a fancy title, a budget, or even a master plan to shift the energy on your unit. You just need one strategy and the willingness to try something new and different. In today's video, we're going to be walking through some real evidence-based strategies that really any nurse can implement to bring more energy, connection, and life into your workplace. So whether you're a clinical nurse eager to spark some change, or you're a leader looking to build a more supportive environment, this video is for you. So let's talk about it. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Katie Stevens RN, founder of Katie Stevens Consulting, and I have been a nurse for 20 years, and I have served in many different roles over that time, everything from the bedside to the executive suite. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that culture change doesn't just shift from the top down. Many times it just starts with some awareness, with some intention, and with real people who care enough and who also have the courage to just take one bold step forward. More and more, we are seeing nurses recognize that business as usual in healthcare is really just not sustainable. Across the profession, we're pausing and we're reflecting and we're starting to ask deeper questions like, what do we need to be well as nurses? What does it look like to work in a place where we can breathe, where we can truly connect, and where we can really feel human again? These are signs of an awakening that are happening. Nurses are having honest conversations about how we lead, how we show up to support one another, and how we show up for our teams, our patients, and, even ourselves. And we're really starting to see some movement. Nurses and teams across the country are getting creative. They are testing new rhythms and, building these pockets of well-being within all of the chaos. And no, we cannot change everything overnight, but we can plant seeds, and that's exactly what's happening. And so that's really exciting to see. So what can you actually do right now on your unit to shift the culture in a more positive and life-giving direction? What I will tell you is that you don't necessarily need a wellness committee or even a budget. You just need a little creativity and a little courage and the willingness to take the first step. So let's go through 10 evidence-based strategies. We're going to call these micro practices that you can try. I've grouped them into 4 themes or categories that can help really spark some real cultural change on your unit or your department. Now, I do want to say that today we're going to be focusing on micro practices that really anyone on the unit can implement, regardless of title or role. Now, in a future video, we'll dive into more, say, formal organizational strategies that might require more approval or support. So if that's something you're interested in hearing about, discussing, sharing, then please let me know in the comments below. So the first category we'll start with, we're going to call rhythm, because wellness really isn't just about what we do, but it's about the pace and the intention behind why and how we do it. So well-being is rhythmic. So without pauses to reset, stress can really accumulate and start to become chronic. So nurses and really all people need built-in moments to breathe. So one of the things that you can try is creating a simple, what I would call like a reset space. So it doesn't need to be a spa, just a quiet corner. If you can find one with a chair, you could put up a calming photo, a prayer card, or a reflection. You can use some noise canceling earbuds, and that can really be enough. And if you don't have the physical space, you could try maybe a mobile reset kit, something with maybe some essential oils in there if they're approved. You could use some quotes and scriptures, maybe some earplugs or a mindfulness prompt. So the point behind all of this is that evidence shows that even 10 minutes of quiet in the midst of a chaotic and busy shift can really reduce cognitive fatigue, it can reduce emotional exhaustion, and it can really help restore some clarity, which is, of course, very important in the work that we do as nurses. Another powerful rhythm builder can be a wellness moment in your huddle. This could be as simple as a 60-second, breathing exercise where there's maybe some quick intention setting where everyone takes a moment just to remember why we're here today, or even share a quick reflective question, something like, what are you grateful for this week? Or something, what are you looking forward to this week? These small pauses can really help create some team cohesion and then also really reset the tone of your shift. You can also try something like an end of shift reflection where you have maybe a quick 2-minute debrief on, hey, what worked well today? What's one thing that we all learned today? This again really helps teams build cohesion and trust. And finally, you can consider something fun or meaningful around your shift transitions. Maybe something like placing your hand over your heart and saying, I gave my best today, or doing something like a team high five. These things can maybe sound a little bit cheesy, but practices like these can really be powerful, and they can help really signal closure, which is something that we as nurses often don't really get enough of. And they can also signal that shift between work and rest and really helping people leave work at work. All right, the next category we're going to look at is amplifying the good, or focusing on what's going right. In high stress environments, the brain naturally likes to fixate on problems, but we can interrupt that pattern. So one way to do that is to start a gratitude or recognition practice. Now, this is not rocket science here, but the evidence overwhelmingly suggests that recognition and positive affect directly buffer against burnout. They increase job satisfaction, and they also improve team morale. So daily recognition has repeatedly been shown to boost dopamine and serotonin levels, which is kind of a little fun fact. So again, there is real science here behind all of these practices. And there are a ton of free ways to recognize people. Maybe it is a wins wall in your break room, or a shout out jar with sticky notes, or, a rotating "you made a difference" board. The key here is really consistency, and, get creative here. Gratitude practice regularly doesn't just lift morale, it actually starts to rewire our brains to see the good more often and more clearly. So another idea is to actually celebrate micro milestones, things like birthdays, work anniversaries, or even, recognizing people for you covered me on a crazy day kind of acknowledgement. All of those things really matter. And these do not require approval or a budget, just a little attention and intention. And here's the point, that recognition really tells people that they are seen and that they are valued and that they matter. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is intentional connection. So connection is not a luxury. The science is actually showing us that it is a protective factor against burnout. Nurses with strong peer relationships do report less burnout and higher job satisfaction. So one of the things that you can do is build in quick reflective questions during your huddle. So things like, what gave you energy yesterday? Or, things like, what made you laugh this week? Really simple questions. And these aren't just icebreakers. These are really culture shapers. Reflection-based questions really increase team coherence, and they really do increase self-awareness. And when you start to normalize reflection, you really start making space for human connection in the midst of all of the hustle during your busy shift. You can also build in a peer encouragement loop. So you can pair people up either formally or informally and really encourage weekly check-ins. Even if it's just a quick text or a sticky note, peer support really helps mitigate against secondary trauma, and it builds relational resilience. So the goal here is to remind each other that you are not alone in this and that we are all here for one another. Now, if you want to keep wellness really visible on your unit or your department, you can try setting up a micro learning or an inspiration corner, you can call it. So you could post, quick weekly wellness tips, inspiring quotes, calming affirmations. You can also, use QR codes that link to short breathing exercises or a helpful podcast. So this is a really simple and subtle way to keep really well-being on your radar, even during a hectic shift. And there are so many options on this kind of inspiration corner idea. And finally, let's talk about leadership. And I'm not talking about the kind of leadership that requires a title, but the kind of leadership that really starts with presence. So one of the things that you can do is try rotating a wellness champion or a wellness captain role each week, or some sort of leadership type role. So give one person the creative license to bring in something like, a quote of the day, or, set the tone during the huddle or something like that. It can be a light lift, but a huge morale booster. So plus, this starts to get more people involved in really shaping the culture. And again, the evidence is very clear that empowerment, that shared leadership, that rotating micro leadership roles really does help people build agency. It helps people build confidence, and it also really increases ownership and participation. And also, don't underestimate the power of initiating something fun and playful. Things like hydration trackers, step challenges, or things like nurse bingo. You can use squares like I took a break, or I recognized a teammate, or I paused to breathe before my shift as your bingo places. So playfulness isn't fluff. It really helps to build camaraderie. It lifts the mood, and it really signals to one another that we care for each other here. So now let's bring all of this home. If you've been waiting for permission to make things better on your unit or your department, consider this your sign. This is it. So you don't need to overhaul your unit. You don't need a title. You don't even really need, a master plan. You just need one small act of courage and the willingness to try. So, and again, do not worry about doing all 10 strategies. In fact, please do not try that. Just choose one. Pick the one that really speaks to your spirit, that speaks to your shift rhythm, that speaks to your team dynamic, and then really start there. Maybe that means bringing in a quote of the day for your break room. Maybe it means, quietly setting up a mobile reset kit and getting that going, or starting a gratitude jar and, you leave the first note. Or, it could even be sharing this video with a colleague or your manager and saying, hey, let's do something. So none of these ideas are fluff. They are all backed by research and by real world impact. The evidence is strong that suggests shared governance, psychological safety, peer support, recognition, that all of these tools improve retention, reduce burnout, and in turn, they have a positive impact on the patient care environment. So start small, pilot something, and invite someone else into it. Wellness is cultural, and culture shifts happen when people like you take action. You don't have to lead a revolution. You just need to take the first step. The one thing that I do know is that this isn't just about wellness. This is really about reclaiming the joy, the clarity, and the connection that really drew us to this profession in the first place. And if you're really passionate about nurse wellness, check out our other video on why wellness is no longer optional in nursing. I think it will add some perspective to the content from today.